Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, my unfortunately alive co-host. And we are here today to talk about that very concept, the cycle or the circle of life.
Yeah.
And the inevitability of death, because we are talking about how you can categorize franchises.
Yeah.
Alive, dead, somewhere in the middle. Who knows? What does that mean? We're going to find out. And we're only here discussing this because our good friend Bo, Bo Talks Games, made a very good video recently talking about whether or not Nintendo takes good care of their old IP, the IP that people consider to be quote-unquote dead from Nintendo. Yes. And it was a very good video. I liked it a lot, as I like all of Bo's stuff. Bo, number one.
Some of them. Some of them are not.
I think he's the number one Nintendo YouTuber. But I didn't agree with everything Bo said.
Sure.
And frankly, I forget what Bo said in that video. Yeah. Because we're going to record this a month ago.
Yes.
But what we have instead of Bo, we have our community submissions.
Absolutely.
And if you want to talk to us about...
Some might say it's better. I don't know.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I would. I love the community more than I love Bo. If you want to talk to us about topics like this, anything at all, be sure to join our Discord. Link as usual, top of the description right down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, leave a comment letting us know if you agree with our assumptions as to what makes a franchise dead or alive.
Yes. Spur on conversation.
Yeah. But Tucker, I think that this is a really cool topic because obviously we love games history. We love Nintendo's catalog. We love PlayStation's catalog.
Yep.
And when you love games history, you love Nintendo's back catalog, you love PlayStation's back catalog.
You like a lot of shit that is not coming out right now.
Yes. And that invites, I think, so much conversation and I would say a lot of frustration within various communities as to whether, you know, these are being neglected, if they're forgotten, if they're ever coming back. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially when, you know, a random revival comes out and gives you hope for what might come next. So I think we should just dive into it. But I think we should maybe start with a community comment, if we will.
Yeah. Well, you wanted to actually start with someone who's near and dear to our hearts, but who, frankly, did not respond with their thoughts on this. They responded with, which is an analysis of multiple different franchises. It's
good.
But Phil the Pill, classic BLB community member, says, death is a spectrum. In the context of video games, we'll agree.
Sure.
Some video game franchises are severely injured, such as Advance Wars, which may have received a mortal blow with 1+2 Reboot Camp. Some franchises are stillborn, like Daemon X Machina. Great phrasing, by the way. I want to say, Phil, I really respect you for saying that. Some have had some love in their upbringing, but are having a failure to launch and thrive, like ARMS, which he did not fully capitalize, so that's actually not the name of the series, which I would not consider dead, but not particularly healthy. Star Fox, to me, is comatose. Almost any franchise represented in Smash clearly has enough love for it among Nintendo's development community for there to be hope. Star Fox and Kid Icarus are stuck here. I think people would legitimately be excited for new entries in these franchises. Ice Climbers are ghosts, fondly remembered. Some franchises will forever live on as echoes through Nintendo's nostalgia machine like Smash Bros. Stickers or occasionally free Switch Online offerings. Excitebike, Game & Watch, Pilot Wings. And then there's Dead. Magical Starside, which is so dead that we are obsessed with Nintendo history. We never even heard of this. Yeah. And this is a Nintendo published game. Jesus Christ. Steel Diver, Starfy, Elite Beat Agents, Fossil Fighters, Freaky Forms, Endless Ocean, Dylan's Rolling Western, Drill Dozer. Until a franchise is this dead, it's not truly death. This is true death. Kind of a hard line to end that on.
Do you think that Nintendo knows that I bought a copy of Endless Ocean Blue World recently? Do you think that moves the needle for them at all as to bring the franchise back?
They're thinking about it.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, they got guys.
I like what Phil says here because I think he comes up with these categories that I don't agree with.
Yeah.
But I think
he's using extreme terminology. Uncommon terminology, I would say. I don't think I've ever heard of a comatose video game series.
I mean, I think that's interesting, but what he does well, in my opinion, here is he lays out for us an interesting kind of like shades of disappeared that we can discuss. But I actually don't agree with some of the things he suggests here.
Sure.
Especially if we look at the stillborn section.
Yeah.
Daemon X Machina has a sequel.
It does. Which, to be clear, I'm sure he's never heard of.
Right.
I'm sure he doesn't know that's coming out because no one gives a fuck. Sorry, Bo. Yeah. No one cares.
Nobody's excited for Titanic Side. And then he also cites ARMS, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because ARMS is in a really weird place, and then it sold quite well. I think 3 million copies.
Yeah.
And had a comic that was canceled, been gone for a long time, got a character in Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that really is dead.
Yeah.
But I also think that we're going to roll through a couple of community sessions kind of fast here.
Okay.
I think they link to each other nicely. Sure. The notion of ARMS in particular is interesting to me, and it brings in
any opportunity we have to talk about ARMS, we'll take.
Yes. It brings in the conversation something that our friend David P. wrote. And there's a little bit of...
What does P stand for? Who knows?
Parentheses. There was a little bit of discussion in our submissions channel about Mother, about whether Mother is dead.
Yes.
And
Earthbound.
Yes.
For those cultured individuals.
David said something that I thought was really interesting here. He says, I think a key distinction is whether or not you'd consider Mother a franchise. Perhaps it's a little semantical, but I think making that distinction really demonstrates why there's unlikely to be any more sequels or remakes.
Yeah.
The Mother series was a very personally directed procession of 3 very distinct games. There were never any spin-offs, and all 3 games retained the personal involvement of Shigesato Itoi, who still retains rights over the series at large. It's kind of the opposite of a franchise at that point. For the best, obviously, those 3 games don't need endless iteration.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really good point, because that's a clear example of a franchise existing for the duration it needed to.
Yes.
And the story being told, the creator being done, still releases merchandise, still engaged with the fans, but they're done. Even Toby Fox said a little while ago in an interview that like he was in talks to like pitch a Mother game and maybe do something, and it didn't happen. And you'd imagine that Nintendo is not going to just say, we don't want Toby Fox making an Earthbound game. I think it's the story's been told. Now, ARMS is obviously a different situation, right? In that I would imagine Nintendo wants to continue that forward.
Sure. I would hope.
I would hope too.
And I continue to every day.
But there's also no reason to necessarily suspect that that team of people who work on Mario Kart and work on all the other franchises were saying, yep, ARMS is our next big thing. We're making ARMS now. There might be something very refreshing about having a one-off project and getting back to your bread and butter work in Mario Kart or whatever. So I think this is why it's an interesting conversation to me, because there's a degree of, I think, needing to let go when it comes to certain franchises. I think Mother's a great example. I also think ARMS is a good example.
Sure.
I think that ARMS, especially by the time all of its content was out, it was a pretty full vision of what that could be. And while I think there's a lot of room to grow, the game reviewed well enough. It sold exceptionally well for new IP. The pieces are there, but there seems, in my opinion, to be a creative decision not to make another one. So I think that sometimes we get in this mindset that when something is new, it must be iterated on, and there must be more and more and more. Yeah. And if there's not, there's a problem. But if you look back at Nintendo's history, I mean, we've been playing a lot of Wii games. We've been playing a lot of interesting GameCube, early 2010 stuff, mid 2010 stuff. A lot of that has one sequel, no sequels.
No sequels.
So I think that that's just kind of a thing you have to tune your mind into. Some of this stuff is not meant to persist longer.
Sure. Yeah, that is a category until I'd actually read and paid attention to David's comment. I never really thought about the series that are finished because the original creator is finished with them. Yeah. And there was never the intention to continue it in a greater way because it was something that was meant to just be an enclosed story. I think the reason why I never think about that is because 99.9% of video game franchises, IP, things we're familiar with, do not exist in that capacity. Yeah. A company owns them. They license them out to other teams to make games of them. There are spin-offs. There are reboots. There are remakes. Mother is such a unique circumstance where those 3 games are all that exists for that franchise. There's never been a Mother spin-off. There's never even been a remake. There's been Smash Brothers representation, which is how most people are familiar with it. But I made a comment here below. What are other game series that are done? And because I want to make that clear that there is a distinction between finished and dead, because Mother was never intended to continue. But people still call Mother one of Nintendo's dead franchises. That might be the franchise that people bring up as Nintendo doesn't pay attention to their old IP. People really want this. Why aren't they bringing it back? Why isn't? Where's Mother 3? Where's a remake? Why aren't these games coming? Because that is really, really rare. And when I think about the creators and the franchises and the games that I like, I think there's a balance between ones that are from big series, from big teams that no one necessarily owns it. There's not a specific creator. But then I think of the ones that are one-off things. Yeah. Something like Thomas Was Alone. And that game never got a sequel. Will probably never get a sequel. And that's because that creative wants to continue to do other things. And he's not interested in continuing it. But I don't think people would call that a dead series, because I don't think there was ever the idea of, oh, we're going to keep making these games. Because in that, especially that regard, and many other similar things like indie games in particular, Firewatch, Edith Finch, these games, there's never the idea they're going to get a sequel, because people understand, oh, that is from a small team, that's from a specific creative. Yeah. It becomes a lot more muddied when we talk about bigger IP, things from Nintendo, published by Nintendo, published by PlayStation, where some of them, very scant few, have one creative voice behind them that has a vision for what there's going to be, and doesn't want it to spider out to other things. And Mother is basically the only one of those that especially Nintendo has.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I think that this idea, just in general, of being finished with the project is something that I think fans sometimes have a really hard time with. Yeah. I think that Naughty Dog is a really good example. Mm-hmm. People want Naughty Dog to make a new Jack game. Yeah. Neil Druckmann has no interest in making a Jack game. If Jack and Daxter ever comes back, it's going to be because Sony grabbed that IP, gave it to someone else. Mm-hmm. Even Uncharted is another good example, right? I mean, I don't think that Neil Druckmann has any interest in writing another Uncharted game. No. Yeah. And so the Uncharted game that presumably exists is existing somewhere else, because that team is done and Sony has an imperative to want to progress the franchise. I also think about Shovel Knight. I think Shovel Knight's a really interesting case here, because Yacht Club made Shovel Knight. They made the DLCs they promised via the Kickstarter. Yeah.
They made like 6 games.
Yeah, and then what's everybody always saying? Where's Shovel Knight 2? Where's Super Shovel Knight or something? They don't care. They want to go make Mina the Hollower. Yeah. So they'll let, I think Nitro made one of them, and then Vine, I think the team's called Vine that made the other one. They'll partner with people to maybe keep that IP relevant, but they're done with it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that done with is an idea that has to be reckoned with, especially in the case of successful franchises. Yeah. I mean, ARMS is a good example. ARMS is not a failure. Mm-hmm. There's no scenario in which the creative success, commercial success, and financial success of ARMS is not enough to get another game. Mm-hmm. That's just not true.
Yeah, well, especially when you do contextualize it around other series, especially from Nintendo, that have sold commensurate and received many more entries. Yeah. Things like Pikmin and Metroid and Kirby are around that 3 million mark with their best games. Right. One thing that I think is interesting to expand this conversation into how I sort of felt about, how I feel about the terms dead or alive. Sure. What franchises do I consider to fit in whatever that spectrum of categories is? I think one particular thing that I never really vocalized or thought about specifically until I was wrestling with this is the idea that within a generation, I don't think anything can be said one way or the other. Sure. We have not left the Switch generation. ARMS came out 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. It, as you said, it was a reasonable hit. It was successful for probably the metrics Nintendo wanted it to be. But I would not consider that dead on the level of some of the other things. Yeah. Even something like Star Fox, which had its last game come out 1 year before ARMS, about almost exactly. Yeah. But because that was a previous generation, my mind goes, oh, that's more dead than ARMS is. Yeah. And so if we finish the Switch generation and there's not an ARMS game, if we get a couple years into the next generation of Nintendo and there's not an ARMS game, then I'll be like, yeah, okay, that was a one-off thing. Yeah. There is no... in my mind, within the generation, anything can happen. It doesn't matter. It's... Usually, most series only get one entry per system anyway, especially from Nintendo. That's a really good point. ARMS is not dead in the way that Smash Brothers wasn't dead when it had been a bunch of years at the end of the life cycle of the Wii. Right. But obviously, Smash is a little bit different because there was an expectation that we were going to get that. But there's usually one game per system. And so within a system's life cycle, I'm like, yeah, I can't make a decision whether or not it's dead. At least it is definitely not completely dead.
Yeah, I think Metroid is an interesting example here, right? Because sometimes franchises simply must go away for a while to come back.
Sure.
Metroid had no game on N64. The only appearance of Samus multi-platform was in Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
There was a pretty substantial gap in time after Super Metroid until we get Prime and Fusion in the same weekend. So I'm sure there's probably calls for Metroid being dead in that time. And I think what you alert us to, which is a really good point, is that sometimes there just needs to be space to think.
Definitely.
Or even to fail. I mean, I think Pikmin is a really good example of this. It's obvious that Pikmin 4 failed in the time post Pikmin 3 before the game that we know as Pikmin 4 released. They didn't wait until 2 years before 2013. They didn't wait till 2021 to start saying, hey, let's make Pikmin 4.
Yes.
These franchises are certainly being iterated on, and I think it's important to note, especially in this environment we're in now, when people are, as reports are coming out, either being approached by Nintendo to work on their IP or actively pitching for their IP. These franchises are always in motion to some extent.
No, definitely.
F-Zero famously had Criterion wanting to make a game.
Yeah.
It didn't come to fruition, but there's always motion. I don't think until we get down to what Phil is saying here in the dead category, I'd be very surprised if many people are coming to Nintendo saying,
make a Freaky Forms.
Yeah, we want to bring Steel Divers back. Yeah, I think some of that stuff is truly gone, but I would tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would stake my life on the fact that people are coming to Nintendo and saying, hey, we want to make your Star Fox game.
Yeah.
We're going to pitch a Star Fox game. I am sure that some of the people making these indie Star Fox successors, be it Whisker Squadron, be it whatever, are going to Nintendo with a design document saying, this is a game I've made, this is a game I can make for you, can we make something happen? So I think that's an important dimension of the conversation also. Yeah. To your point, these are games made by hundreds of people that touch the lives of hundreds more who are in the position to try to influence these franchises. Yeah. There's always something happening. Advance Wars, which Phil gives, is a good example. Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp comes from WayForward. We don't know exactly how that came about, whether WayForward pitched... I mean, maybe we do and I don't know it, but whether WayForward pitched Nintendo went to WayForward. But to me, a franchise like Advance Wars is a lot more dead than some of the other things we've mentioned.
Oh, okay, sure.
Because I think that there are certain Hail Mary games that exist. Yeah. And I think that Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp was a Hail Mary game.
Yeah, sure. Last resort.
A last resort. Yeah. Chibi-Robo Ziplash, maybe the most famous Nintendo Hail Mary game ever. Which just don't connect, aren't massively successful. Yeah. Prove to Nintendo, quote unquote, prove that the interest is not there. And I think that there are franchises that are in that position. Yeah. That have that last hurrah or get to try one more time and don't move the needle and then are dead.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think that Star Fox is in that position.
No, I don't think it is either. And I think that this brings into conversation some of the other elements of a video game franchise receiving support and whether or not in your mind that factors into a series being alive or not. I think that the one thing that I am very shaky on, if it counts as true support for a series that keeps it from being truly dead, is representation in something like Smash Brothers. I think Smash goes so deep that it essentially becomes if you were to say the dead franchise doesn't apply to things that have even a spirit in Smash or a sticker in Brawl or whatever, I think that then the pool of games that aren't represented in there would be so small that it becomes basically useless to use. So when we're talking about something like I want to say Fatal Frame, but Fatal Frame actually got games recently. There are a lot of fucking Disc-kun. I guess that's the Disc System one. There are some spirits in Smash, some assist trophies in Smash. Asukapon, there's a good one. Yeah. That these are represented in Smash because Nintendo cares about its legacy. But if Asukapon is still, or what Joy Mac Fight, that's what the franchise is called. Yeah. If Joy Mac Fight is still alive because Sukapon is an assist trophy in Smash Ultimate, then what the fuck is dead?
Let's even bring the level of
Magical
roster.
Star Sign, let's say that.
Let's say the level of roster, though. Yeah. Duck Hunt is not a live franchise.
No, absolutely not. And it has basically never been. It's a one-off game.
I think I think that the idea that Smash Brothers correlates to the health of a franchise is an erroneous one that comes from narratives that Fire Emblem in the West was saved because of Smash Brothers.
Kid Icarus.
Kid Icarus is more true, but only in that Sakurai made Uprising.
Sure.
So Sakurai had a vision for what to do with these characters, and Sakurai's in a position of power to execute on that vision.
And he decided to get a head start on it by putting the characters in Brawl.
Yeah, it literally in the aesthetic that his game was going to be in.
Yeah.
But Fire Emblem, when Marth and Roy were in Melee, Fire Emblem was not doing well, and there were a lot of Fire Emblem games after that that did not do well.
Yeah.
It took Fire Emblem Awakening, which was not only before Smash 4, but also a pretty major pivot for the franchise to bring it back to health. Smash Brothers didn't do that. Smash Brothers didn't make Earthbound popular.
No.
Smash Brothers introduced certain people to Earthbound who went out and sought it out. Smash Brothers introduced me to a lot of franchises, but we're talking about a very niche group of people. Most people who play Smash Brothers and see Captain Falcon as a fighting game character.
Absolutely.
In the game Super Smash Brothers.
100%.
So I think that is Nintendo fans giving...
I'd say there's a chance that most people who have played Smash Brothers think he's just a Smash character.
Yeah.
Because F-Zero is so niche of a series, especially in comparison to Smash Brothers, which is something that's widely known and culturally important, that who even cares? And at that point, because Captain Falcon's in Smash, and of course, that series is now has been restarted because we got a game this year or last year, or within a year. If the understanding of F-Zero in the largest sense was that a character's in Smash and he probably drives cars. I mean, the stages have cars on them. If that is what you count as a series being alive, I just think that that's so disconnected from the reality of series that are receiving actual support that I think Smash is just completely divorced. It certainly can help when something like Min Min showing up in ARMS and having the ARMS thing, who's the character going to be? Here are all the characters. That does reinvigorate interest in that series and keeps it around for a little bit longer. But I don't think if that's the only thing your series is getting, that it can count. And that also extends to something I think is more explicitly a series being alive for me than Smash support. This is other external support, not necessarily games, which is adaptations to other mediums. Something like Castlevania Netflix series, the Uncharted movie, adaptations in that regard. I think that I would consider basically it's one step below getting a game, but it is official support, wide mainstream support. Castlevania might be better known because there was multiple anime series on Netflix than any time in its life cycle. And of course, that'll probably mean we eventually get a Castlevania game that was more popular. But I think that getting something like a movie or getting something like a TV series is keeping that series alive, because it shows that the creators or the IP holders usually have interest in making sure this is in the minds of people, which is, I think, kind of where I connect. Is this alive or not? Does the company making this game want people to know that this is something that they have to produce?
It's interesting because I agree and I disagree, because I think in certain cases that's doubtlessly true.
Sure.
Gran Turismo, Gamer to Racist is a great example of this. Gran Turismo is GT7 came out 2021?
Yeah,
I think maybe it might have been 2022. The movie,
no, it's 2022.
Yeah. The movie only brings that to more people.
Yeah,
it only helps that franchise go bigger. But we just learned from Sony CES that they're making 2 new movies and shows.
Yeah.
One is a Gravity Rush movie, and then there's a Patapon anime.
Yeah.
I personally wouldn't say that when that Patapon anime comes out, that it's really alive. So you've got to.
Why not though? I mean, that's probably the most popular Patapon will ever be, and if that is successful, we automatically get another game, and so then you can't retroactively say, it wasn't until the game came out that this series was popular or understood culturally, because it was this is of course future projecting.
Yeah.
It was the anime that actually brought it back to life.
Well, I guess this is interesting because I think we'd have to define for ourselves what we mean by alive.
Yeah. Well, I tried my best to say, but I think it is receiving support from that creative, from the publisher, the creating team, all that stuff.
Well, I guess it's more important for me to say what I would say as an alive franchise.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I'm curious about the games, really.
Sure.
First and foremost. Yeah. Pivoting something like Gravity Rush to being a movie is cool.
Yeah.
But to me, Gravity Rush is a series of games.
Yeah, of course.
And so if there's no Gravity Rush game, but there's a movie, it doesn't do much for me.
Sure.
And I think it comes back to sort of the subjective notion of what you're going to take to be dead or alive.
Sure. Yeah.
My definition of alive is actually quite similar to Rika-Lee.
Okay. Yeah.
Who says this here? Says, I say a franchise is alive when it's doing well both financially and creatively and is beloved by fans, like how all of Nintendo's mainline entries of their mainline single-player and multiplayer series are on the Switch, with 2D and 3D Mario, with Mario Wonder and Odyssey being an example, 3D Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, 2D Metroid Dread, etc. Mm-hmm. I want to give the example of, I'm going to just double check that this is a good example. The Pikmin shorts. When did the Pikmin shorts come out?
What, 2014, 2015?
They released in 2014.
Yeah.
There was a long period of time when the Pikmin shorts were the newest thing, right?
Yes.
And let's just say for the sake of argument here, the Pikmin shorts came out in 2016.
Okay.
Divorced from a game.
Mm-hmm.
Those shorts have millions and millions and millions of views on YouTube.
Yeah.
More people watch those shorts than have played Pikmin 3, for a good example. But to me, that's not Pikmin being really alive.
Okay, sure.
I think, and I agree with what Rika-Lee is saying, an alive franchise is receiving games.
Okay, yeah.
For me, in the most simplest terms, that's an alive franchise.
Sure. Though I will say that I think that it's a good example.
Yeah.
I think that we would both agree that there is a difference between putting out these animated shorts and putting out a feature film or featuring it on Netflix, which is going to get a bunch more eyes, has financial viability, which these basically didn't. But I also think that, and I know this is not necessarily what you're arguing, but that's not a great example because that would have been, even for the sake of argument, 3 years after a game. You can't say a franchise is dead 3 years after, and 1 year before another game. So even in that time period,
it wasn't a good example. I think that's a good point. But I would even, I just don't think that Castlevania is interesting, right?
Sure, yeah.
Because Castlevania might get a lot of merch. Castlevania gets a Dead Cells collaboration.
Collections.
It gets collections. It gets a show.
Yeah.
It gets a couple shows. But where's the game?
Mm-hmm.
Or Devil May Cry is another great example.
Sure.
Devil May Cry's example I should have given instead of Pikmin. This is a bad example.
Yeah.
Forget I said that. Strike it from your memory.
Whoop.
Devil May Cry is getting an anime on Netflix.
Sure.
The last Devil May Cry game came out in 2019, so it's been 5 years. I'm sure they're going to make DMC6.
Yeah, sure they're working on it.
I'm sure they're working on it, probably, but obviously a lot of those guys are off on Dragon's Dogma, and they're doing various things.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like directors over making Final Fantasy 16 now or whatever. I would consider that DMC right now is pretty dormant.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say that because getting an anime on Netflix, it's alive again suddenly. Maybe that's just because I don't care.
Sure.
But I think a good portion of this is whether you care about what's coming out or not.
Sure.
In complete honesty.
Yeah.
To get away from the subjective side of things. I do not give a fuck that they make a Devil May Cry show.
Yeah.
I'm not going to watch a Devil May Cry show.
You're not going to buy the Virgil skin in Fortnite.
I'm not going to buy the Virgil skin in
Sam
Fortnite.
Will. Sam's very excited.
Then good for Sam. But I want to play Devil May Cry 6.
Sure.
And to me, that series is dormant until Devil May Cry 6 releases.
Now, here's something that is, I think, we should have maybe just defined earlier.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a time frame between how long between entries where that you then consider a series dormant, inactive, dead, whichever one of those you want to use, even if there is a variance between them? Because I do think there is maybe 8 to 10 years is the point in time where I'm like, all right, this is worrisome. If we haven't seen something, a new game from a series in a decade or almost a decade, then I'm like, that's pretty dead. I think 5 years is interesting. I don't necessarily disagree that Devil May Cry is a dormant franchise at the moment. I do subjectively disagree that, okay, having an anime does show that Capcom is still supporting that pretty consistently, but also especially in the time that we're in now with the development scale of AAA games, a game like Devil May Cry 6 is going to take 4, 5, 6 years to make. And so if it's only been 5 years since DMC5, the series can't be dead because you can't expect DMC6 to have already come out.
Yeah, but you could maybe, and I understand that this is an inherently contradictory conversation.
Sure.
But I think it also speaks to the fact that it's all vibes based at a certain point.
Of course it is. Absolutely.
And I think you are right.
Yeah.
There's really no objective reason why I should be upset that there's no DMC6 yet, but hold out hope that ARMS might come back, or ARMS is just asleep right now, or they want it to be a one-off or whatever. I think part of the emotional heart of this conversation is, do you care about the franchise or not?
Sure.
and in that is deciding what aggravates you and what doesn't aggravate you.
Okay, yeah.
Metal Gear is a good example here. Because if we want to even take my definition of a series being alive, who's going to tell you that Metal Gear Survive was an example of Metal Gear still being alive? Konami putting out Metal Gear Survive doesn't do anything but upset the majority of Metal Gear fans.
Yes. And not sell well.
And
lose the money.
And lose the money. And then they put out a Metal Gear Solid 3 pachinko machine.
Yeah.
Is the franchise alive because they're doing things with it? Maybe not. Is the franchise even alive because it's getting new games? Probably not. Chibi-Robo is another good example. Was Chibi-Robo Ziplash was a Hail Mary pass to...
But it was also something that upset the fans and didn't retain that original spirit.
It's a Hail Mary pass to try to make Chibi-Robo a thing that is going, but as a 2D platform, which Chibi-Robo has never been, the game was not good. I don't think that counts as it being alive either.
Sure. And we've been talking about degrees of death, but now we get to talk about degrees of life. And I think that there are multiple ways you can interpret this, because I do take the stance of divorcing myself from how I feel about projects or feel about my interest in a certain series. Is if there are games coming out, that's support. I mean, if it's a spin-off, if it's not from the original creator, that's support. There's a new game on the shelf. I think you have to make a lot of caveats, which I'm not saying there aren't important caveats, but you have to make a lot of caveats to say, okay, no, that's actually dead, even though there was a game. But I would say that there is another degree of life, which is creative life. And actually, that ties back into something that Rickley said here. He says, I personally say a series is dead when it has no chance of coming back or redemption after one or more catastrophic failures. No, wait, this is not the comment I thought it was.
No, this is right.
Okay. Like how Sonic 06 essentially killed Sonic, the Sonic Adventure style of 3D Sonic games, because it was so much worse and so broken and unpolished compared to what came before. Despite it being originally planned and stated to be the exact opposite of that, and to be the rebirth of 3D Sonic, it hilariously, ironically, ended up being the ultimate death of 3D Sonic, or at least its original formula for a long time, and still to this day to some extent as well. And so this, I think, Sonic 06 is a good example, although no one would ever argue that Sonic was a dead series. You can say that sub-series, the adventure style of game, and then you're like, okay, well then there's some elements of Unleashed count. Like there's a lot of... Sonic is a specific one that like gets really nitty-gritty, but creative life, I think, is definitely a different degree of life. And I would apply that to Metal Gear as well. As I would say Metal Gear, the franchise as it was for most of its history, with the creator Hideo Kojima now being estranged from Konami, having no involvement with new projects, that series is dead in the way that we knew it. But Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid are not dead franchises. I mean, it's been a while since Survive, but we did get the collection. Delta is on its way. Other remakes and things are are rumored or in the works. That series is not dead, but in the way that we knew it, in the way that it was intended to be, it absolutely is, because Kojima is not involved. He was pushed out of this series. The last game that he was involved with didn't end very well. There are two different ways to understand that of Kojima Metal Gear is dead. Yeah. Metal Gear is not dead.
And that is, I think this is a really interesting example, because you can maybe make the case that if Kojima's Metal Gear is dead, then Metal Gear is dead.
Sure.
Because
well, no, I don't think you necessarily can, because Metal Gear is getting games, is getting support. Yeah. Again, the difference is literally Metal Gear is an alive series with getting games. Yeah. Kojima's Metal Gear, you can say the true Metal Gear if you want. That is dead.
No, and that's fair, but I think that goes back to the idea of if you can subjectively define a different degree of death, you can subjectively define a different degree of life. Yeah. Like, Metal Gear Delta, to a lot of people, doesn't look that good. Mm-hmm. I mean, it looks literally good. It's an Unreal... Fidelity-wise. Yeah, the fidelity is great. I think it's on Unreal 5. But it lacks the spirit for a lot of people. The Masters collection doesn't run right on a bunch of platforms. Mm-hmm. The control bindings are fucked on PC. So I don't think that makes fans very excited either.
Sure, yeah.
Halo's an interesting franchise to bring in the conversation here too. Halo Infinite's in a much better place now than it was a little while ago.
Yeah.
But if you go back to like 2014, you're
Halo 5 Master Collection. People are confused and frustrated about these.
In 2014,
where the fuck is Bungie? God damn it.
Yeah, in 2012, Halo 4 comes out and is controversial in that it basically brings Halo a lot closer to Call of Duty in how the movement and the speed of the gunplay is.
Yeah.
And then you have Master Chief Collection comes out that literally does not work online at launch.
Yeah.
And then you have the Halo 5 campaign, which a lot of people don't like because they have bad taste. And you have suddenly a franchise that does look pretty dead.
Yeah.
Sure, it's getting games, but I think that it's totally fair on a player-to-player level to say, yeah, Halo is not dead, or Halo is the walking remains of Halo is not the Halo that we know.
Yeah,
and I think that that's a okay perspective to have.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's certainly one that a lot of, especially hardcore fans, hold. And this then becomes the crux of conversation when people are talking about a series.
Yeah,
being dead or alive online is how much are they dedicated to one specific style, one element of it? How much is that specific style or element important to them? I am in an interesting place where internally, I don't think there's any series, franchise, a set of games that I care enough about one specific style or element of it or one era of it to make that claim where I would say, okay, even though there are games, because it's not this, it is dead. Yeah. I'm just not, my brain doesn't work in that way, and this is a reductive way to analyze it, but my mind goes to, I feel like I don't necessarily have the I'm not the creator. I'm not the creator. Say my opinion on this. Yeah. It doesn't define internally. But then I wouldn't make that claim personally. Where I'm like, oh, just because Halo 4 isn't what I wanted Halo to be, doesn't mean that Halo is dead. It's a walking corpse. I just don't use that kind of like that level of phrasing that I think carries with it some negative associations and like it's a very subjective thing for me. But that is definitely something that people talk about all the time. It's like, oh, especially with Metal Gear or with the Pokemon series. People are like, oh, Pokemon's been dead for a while because, man, the 3DS games were shit. Now the Switch games are shit. And it's like, what the fuck? But I don't think anyone would actually argue that Pokemon has ever been a dead franchise, obviously. Yeah. But there are different elements of different eras of Pokemon that heavily resonate with different people.
And I think this is a completely different pillar of the conversation, right? Because now you're talking about franchises that are very prolific but make a lot of creative decisions people don't like.
Yeah, Sonic's another one of those.
Sonic is great. Sonic and Pokemon are probably two of the greatest examples for me in that.
Final Fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, the last Pokemon game I really liked with basically no reservations is probably Let's Go.
Sure.
Even though I also really like Sword and Shield. I wouldn't claim that Pokemon is dead. I would just say Pokemon is probably not for me anymore.
Yes, yeah.
Halo, I love all the Halo games. I think all of those are great. Sonic is an interesting one where I've played so many Sonic games I don't like.
Yes.
That
you can just say it's a bad series. It's an alive series, but it's a bad series.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe an interesting part of the conversation too. But I think we're getting off track a little bit.
Do we want to recenter with ourselves or a comment?
I want to bring it back to Star Fox for a second.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Star Fox, Bo cites a couple things as Star Fox still being alive.
Oh, yeah.
Which I want to talk about with you.
Now we're bringing in Bo's comment. He's not here. He didn't send it, but we remember it.
I remember
deep inside.
Bo is interesting.
This is for you, buddy.
Bo,
drumroll, please.
Talking about how, and you made the point, Star Fox Zero is not that long ago.
Yeah.
In my head,
8 years ago.
Yeah, in my head, that's a long time.
Yeah.
I think that's pushing it a little bit.
What do you mean?
For like, you probably should have been a Star Fox game within that time.
Oh, sure.
Especially when you look at...
Especially the success of the Switch, the success of revitalizing IP.
Yeah.
Why wasn't Star Fox among those? It probably could have been a lot better. It probably could have actually revitalized the series. Why haven't they done it yet?
Bo raises a couple things that are signs of Star Fox still being alive.
Yeah.
He raises Starlink, which not only had Fox in the base game on Switch, but had a Star Fox expansion.
Yep. And it had physical figures and was a big part of marketing for that game.
He also raises Star Fox 2 coming back first on the SNES Classic and then on Nintendo Switch Online. And then he also, and this is more of a general point, but I'll use it in the case of Star Fox, talking about Star Fox 64 being on Switch Online.
Yeah.
And then we've already discussed this point, but Wolf coming back to Smash Brothers.
Sure.
I personally...
Yeah, I don't agree with almost any of those. Starlink's the only one I can see kind of an argument for, because Nintendo was involved in that.
Yeah. I do not agree that re-releasing games counts.
I completely agree.
Let me give you the ultimate example.
Yeah. Oh, here's another one. Here's one. Is Winback alive? Winback was in that first fucking slate of N64 games. Winback is not a live franchise, Bo.
But here's a better example. If you pay the inordinate amount of money that PlayStation asks you to pay to get their classic game collection...
You can play Jumping Flash.
Even better, you can play Ape Escape 1, you can play Ape Escape 2, you can play Ape Escape on the Loose, and you can play Ape Escape Academy.
Yeah.
Ape Escape is not a live franchise. Sony actually just shuttered the team that made Ape Escape.
Yes.
I think that when it comes to support, and frankly, this is such a complicated topic for me, I feel like I'm contradicting myself in some ways, and I have to actually go back to the point you were making before.
You always should.
I think that we have to look at the level of input. I think the level of input is important in this also. The movie, and I think you make a fair point about this. Yeah. The movie, that is a big undertaking. That is
the movie as an idea?
Yes.
Okay.
Gravity Rush.
Okay.
We'll talk about Gravity Rush.
I'm sorry. You didn't say Gravity Rush. You said the movie.
I know. I just said the movie. That is a great example of Sony trusting that IP enough to spend probably, let's just say $100 million on...
That's going to be a fucking blockbuster movie? They're spending $100 million on that?
I don't know. I just threw that number out there. But I would assume probably...
I have no idea.
Let's just say for the sake of argument. God. For the sake of argument, they're going to invest a lot of money in a Gravity Rush.
For the sake of argument, if they do that, they're going to lose a lot of money.
But interestingly, they believe in it enough to bring it to
absolutely, yeah. That went through multiple layers of people greenlighting it, saying, yeah, actually, we do think that's going to happen.
It takes very little work for a Nintendo or PlayStation, comparatively little work, to take the ROMs they already have and put them into what are essentially emulators. Yeah. The Nintendo 64 Online is an emulator. Yeah. And you just insert the games into it. Mm-hmm. That's very reductive, but that's kind of the way it works, right? So, to me, that doesn't really indicate anything.
No, I don't either. And I think this also does the exact same thing that I was talking about with Smash representation. Yeah. Is so many games have been re-released in that way. So many games are available on Game Pass, on PlayStation Plus, on all the different levels of whether that was the Wii eShop or the Wii U eShop or now Nintendo Switch Online. This has happened to so many games that the degree of games that are not represented in that would be so small that the term would essentially become useless. If you were to say Winback being released on NSO, which of course is a different argument from Star Fox, but Winback being released on NSO means that Winback as a series is receiving still some support. No, they just had the ROM for Winback.
Yeah, and I also think that there's a difference between great franchise support and just well-maintaining your back catalog.
Sure.
And I think that's something Nintendo does a good job at.
I think those are separate.
Yeah, and Golden Sun's a great example. They're bringing the first two Golden Sun games, they're emulating the link cable support, so you can do whatever you need to in that game. And they're also, when they announced it, they cut a new trailer. Mm-hmm. It was a nice trailer. Yeah. But I don't think that means that Golden Sun is bad. I don't think that we're getting a remake of the first game. I don't think we're getting Camelot to make a new one.
Pilot Wing is not alive.
Although I don't think it's impossible that Camelot's making a Golden Sun game. But that's a totally different conversation. I think that we have to parse some of these things. Yeah. And it's possible for fan service to exist and for Nintendo to take care of their fans, but not be illustrating that a franchise is back swinging.
True. I would agree with that.
And I want to bring into a conversation here Adam Hurd's point. Yeah. Adam Hurd says the following. For a game to be truly dead or maybe dormant, since as Bo said, it can always just appear out of nowhere like this Famicom Technical games. Yeah. I think it needs to be very unlikely to receive a new release and hasn't had one in like 10 years. Mm-hmm. If the series isn't active in development, we tend to know that's the case, and unless it's just after new release, it's not likely to get anything. Punch-Out is an example given, and we've not had a Punch-Out game since the Wii, and we don't know that Nintendo is actively developing a standalone Punch-Out title. Games like Golden Sun, old PlayStation franchise like Parappa that are unlikely to get a new game, grabbed by the Ghoulies and Xbox, etc., those are totally dormant. Yeah. And I think that this is something I would parse out a little bit, because I made the point about Nintendo's always working these franchises. Mm-hmm. Everybody's always working on their IP.
They're not working on Punch-Out.
Well, this is interesting. I then got impatient and said that, well, Devil May Cry is dormant. You're right. I just need to be more patient. Sure. I just want Devil May Cry 6. Yeah. So I have to push back against the Punch-Out point in some ways. And this is where
don't lean too far out of the frame, by the way. You're already fucking edging it.
I like using the space.
Yeah. Wee.
Punch-Out had not had a game since 2009.
Yes.
That was a long time ago.
That was 3 gens ago.
3 generations ago, yeah. I would say that Punch-Out's a dumb franchise.
Yeah.
But I have, and this is maybe a larger Nintendo point, I have about equal faith that any Nintendo franchise would come back.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And within Nintendo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Famicom Detective Club is a really interesting
What about
example.
Dawson?
I don't think that Dawson is going to come back. I think that Dawson and Kurin are off in hell somewhere together.
Hey, Kurin's on NSO.
Oh,
so...
the franchise is alive.
Fuck you, Bo.
I think because I think you also have to. I think that you have to make an equation.
Sure. Okay. All right. Calculus.
You have to do some calculus for franchise coming back. And this is where I think you have to lend a little bit of credence to the point about the online games.
Sure.
Or bring games to online platforms. Because I guarantee that Nintendo is heat mapping data to know who's playing which game.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's impossible that Nintendo looks at that and says, okay, a lot of people are playing Super Punch-Out.
No, they're not.
But just take for example. People are playing Super Punch-Out. The little Macadam announced for Smash 4 got this number of impressions over these other characters.
No, you didn't.
Just hear me out. We now own Next Level Games.
Yeah.
What are they going to work on next for us?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're a little tired of Mario. Maybe they want to go back to Punch-Out. We can make a Punch-Out game for this budget. Based on, player counts here, based on impressions here, based on our own sort of data and market analysis, we could probably spend this much money in a Punch-Out game and it would turn a profit. Mm-hmm. I think that's always at play for Nintendo. Yeah. I think that's always at play
whether or not
for everybody.
Whether or not it's just a couple people going through their IP once a year, judging trailers, judging how many Let's Plays or how many speed runs, how much interaction with this. I think that's probably true. But I think that kind of life is so ubiquitous that for me it becomes a degree of how useful is it to apply any terminology to that, because if it happens to every IP in Nintendo and PlayStation's back catalog and we never see this and it's happening to all of them, then it's like that's not anything.
No, that's a good point. I guess because I hold
Are they doing this for Dawson?
I don't think they're doing it for Dawson. I hold a couple, I think, just inherently contradictory ideas in my head.
As usual.
Yeah. I think that every franchise that Nintendo has is being market researched at all times.
Sure.
I think that there are always third-party teams that are going to Nintendo and pitching things. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that they are pitching for C and D tier IP because they have a better shot.
Of course they are. The interesting thing is then these few examples that get through the cracks and actually end up being produced are such a small number that it becomes obvious that Nintendo doesn't have much interest in actually following through with those things.
That's a good example.
Cadence of Hyrule doesn't really count, but that's working with a smaller team. Way Forward,
Starlink.
Starlink, working with these other teams. It basically doesn't happen. It's a once in a blue moon thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the other side of the thought. Like, I maintain that all these franchises are always being worked on, and even the things that I don't think are useful metrics on a player side, Smash Bros. Representation, NSO representation, I think those are things being considered by Nintendo at all times.
Yeah.
I also think that a lot of it doesn't happen, to your point. Yeah. Well, I know a lot of it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But I also think, and I hold my heart, that Famicom Detective Club is not an alive franchise.
Yeah, yeah. You hold that very darkly and deeply.
But even that is tricky, right? Yeah. Because Famicom Detective Club is not going to be a franchise. Yeah. And it goes back to what we were saying before of not everything has to be a franchise. Sure. It's not like Nintendo was saying, hey, we're going to make a new Famicom Detective Club game. It doesn't even make sense. Yeah. That, again, is back catalog maintenance. Mm-hmm. And so I want to...
Very interestingly, unnecessary back catalog maintenance. Yeah. Frankly. I mean, in terms of financial viability, in terms of fan outcry. Yeah. No one was asking for those games. Those were a complete surprise. And it's great that they did that. And it does show that especially Nintendo, I think more so than any other publisher that holds many IP, cares a lot more about that maintaining back catalog and maintaining relevance for all degrees of their IP, much more so than anyone else. I mean, the best that you're going to get from PlayStation is a PS Plus game. I mean, they have very, very, very few currently active franchises. I mean, even something like Uncharted, you have to make the caveat that there's a movie in development. There was a movie that we have heard rumors that another team is working on that. But Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy were 6 and 7 years ago.
Yeah, and I think...
And Uncharted, my point is, even from Sony, because they put out so few games, they greenlight so few projects, you have to take... We've been talking mostly about Nintendo. You got to take Sony at a completely other ballgame in terms of how frequently they put out games, how alive, how much care do they put in their franchise, and then even Xbox is an even bigger degree of that because they barely put out games. I mean, even their most frequent franchise, Gears of War, hasn't had games since what, 2019, 2018? When was fucking Gears 5? I don't even remember.
2019.
I
think.
And that's one of like the big Xbox franchises.
Gears Tactics was after that.
Oh. And Gears Pop.
Gears Pop. I want to just give a weird example for a second.
Great.
Wolfenstein.
Sure.
I really love the new Wolfenstein games. I love Machine Games Wolfenstein games.
Youngblood, Cyberpilot. Classics.
So those are the two I actually want to talk about. I played Youngblood.
Yes, you did.
I think
you whined about Youngblood.
I bought Youngblood on 2 platforms to support them. I bought it on Switch and I bought it on PlayStation.
Which one did you play it on?
PlayStation.
Okay, good.
I don't think Youngblood's a very good game.
No.
It lacks most of the identity of Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
I also don't believe that Machine Games made that game.
I'm pretty sure Arcane Austin was involved in that.
Yeah. Or what I'm thinking... Right, no. Arcane Austin worked on that. The common speculation is that Bethesda didn't make Fallout 76.
No, I'm pretty sure there is documentation to that.
There's proof to that?
Yeah,
okay.
they were leading a team of external developers, something like that.
But I think this is a weird case, right, where Wolfenstein 3, I want Wolfenstein 3 so fucking badly. That's one of the games I'd be the most excited across the industry if it got announced today. But Youngblood didn't do well. The Wolfenstein games didn't do well either. Mm-hmm. They're critical successes. They're not commercial successes.
Yeah.
Youngblood was panned in multiple regards. And now they're working on Indiana Jones, which is going to be probably the biggest game they've maybe ever made.
Oh, probably, yeah.
They probably have no desire to go back to Wolfenstein at this point. They're probably not being told by Microsoft or Bethesda you should go back to Wolfenstein at this point. They're probably working on this, and then they'll probably make another Indiana Jones game. Wolfenstein, I would say, is probably dormant or dead.
Sure.
Another interesting example.
Yeah.
Star Wars Battlefront. Mm-hmm. Star Wars Battlefront 1, or Battlefront 2015, the DICE games.
Yes. That
sold 13 million copies. That game was a massive success.
Absolutely.
Battlefront 2, mired in all the controversy it was mired in, got off to a really bad start. Did not sell what it was supposed to sell, but still has sold a lot of copies. I think that game is also over 10 million copies sold.
Yeah.
But when the game was at its peak, when it was getting a lot of players back in its later years, with the Celebration Edition and everything, DICE abandoned it. Mm-hmm. DICE totally abandoned the game. They made Battlefront 2042. They said they didn't want to work on that game anymore. They said Battlefront 2 is done.
Yeah.
I don't think they're making Battlefront 3.
Yeah.
I think the Battlefront series is dead.
Yeah, sure.
And again, this is very vibes-based analysis, but I just think it's a weird conversation that we're having because I don't think that there's any objective truth to it.
No, I don't think there's any objective truth to any of this, and I think that the fun thing about this then becomes the knowledge that you and I have and the members of our community have about each of these franchises. How long was it since the last game? When was there? Whether that's a Spirit and Smash or a Pachinko machine or a movie, or is the original creator, have they left? What do we know about in terms of the support coming from the publisher?
Yeah.
It's very fun to combine all these things and then parse out which elements take center stage in the conversation to apply to the series being dead or alive. And those are the terms that are used generally. We actually had some comments from Adam that we didn't read out saying that those aren't the right terms. I think that maybe it's just that they sound a little more aggressive than saying something like dormant and active. But yeah, I find all of this to be fascinating, even if there is no answer, because it is something that is talked about a lot. Every fucking trailer is like, okay, But when is Mother coming back? Where's Mother 3? When are we seeing this series again? Where's the sequel to this? People constantly talking about, oh, these are Nintendo's most dead series, and some of them are ones that get a lot of representation from Nintendo in terms of merchandise, in terms of representation in Smash Brothers, in terms of the fucking profile icons on Nintendo Switch. Nintendo knows about these things, and us as Nintendo fans, we constantly hear all these things. But I do agree that Nintendo has enough going on, and they have a good track record of bringing back things, even bringing back Mario Strikers. Just a few years ago, the Nintendo Blank Sports series had been dead for over an entire console generation at that point.
13 years
since Club.
Oh,
you idiot! You fucking idiot! But
that's 9 years.
I don't even know where I'm going with this.
No, I think it's a good point, and I think that the last thing I'll say is that Sega's in an interesting place right now.
Absolutely.
Because Sega just has a whole slate of things.
When Sega is actually, I would say, maybe second to PlayStation, or no, actually I would say they're probably the biggest publisher with the most IP that people are constantly being like, where are the fucking games?
Yeah.
Why aren't you bringing these back?
Yeah.
Especially because Sega has pivoted, and it's similar to the way that Sony has, of only doing certain IP and just fucking hammering those into the ground. The amount of Sonic and Yakuza that we get compared to the amount of dormant dead franchises they have that they've tried, because both PlayStation and Sega used to try a ton of things. There are so many IP that PlayStation own. We were playing a game yesterday, Blasto, that is developed and produced by Sony Computer Entertainment America. That
Blasto programmed by Neil Druckmann.
That's not true. You fucking guy. I didn't know if you did some Blasto Wikipedia reading last night or something. But Sega is very similar to this, and I think Sega is in a very cool place because they're doing the thing that people have wanted them to do for 20 years.
They are, but I don't even know if it's going to stick. That's one of the things I'm really interested to find out about.
Well, didn't they just announce 3 more games?
Yeah, they said they're working on some other fucking nonsense. I think that Sega is in a weird position where I feel like they're probably going to flood the zone with games, and then most of those are going to be one-offs, and they're going to disappear.
I think that's probably true.
And we got one last comment to read, and I think it's a kind of optimistic point to end on. Henry says, if you can read a pulse, however faint, the series is alive. Therefore, franchise represented in Smash and whatnot don't count as dead franchise, in my opinion, because they're still receiving attention from Nintendo in some capacity. Star Fox is only mostly dead, not dead. And while we disagree with a lot of what's said here, I think that Star Fox being only mostly dead, not dead, is an optimistic note to leave it on.
I would say that's accurate because of multiple elements of the context of this. And again, bringing in development history, bringing in what we know about Nintendo's track record. Star Fox is a big enough IP that Nintendo have shown that they are willing to try a game for every other generation, or of course it was more frequent back in the day. But I'm confident there's going to be another Star Fox game. If I am fucking 50 years old and there's not been a Star Fox game, I will be fucking flabbergasted.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be 3. And one of them might be good, one of them might be a spinoff, one of them might be really bad. But Nintendo, I don't believe that Star Fox is a dead franchise, even if I have to make the caveats that, okay, bringing back Star Fox 2, which I think is actually kind of different from some of the other, putting games on.
There's more work done there.
Yeah, and also that was notorious and had different reasons behind it. And Starlink, and also Star Fox Zero was not that long ago. It was one of the last games in their last system. Even discounting all of that, because Star Fox is a reasonably popular C-tier Nintendo franchise, Nintendo has a track record, so I'm like, that franchise will probably never be dead. In the way that we say Dachshund is dead, or we say something like Jumping Flash is dead. Nintendo makes these pulls. And Star Fox isn't even that deep of a pull to make. And so even though it has been 8 years, or will have been 8 years since Star Fox Zero, Star Fox is not a dead series because Nintendo has shown that they, even with series that has been a decade plus, they're willing to put out another game. Kid Icarus got brought back after that was 15 years or something like that.
It's longer than that.
Pikmin has been in development that whole time, but Pikmin 3 took a decade to come out.
Yeah. I think the bottom line is we learned nothing. And no franchises are really dead.
Yes.
Except for
Dachshund.
Blasto.
Dachshund and Blasto, rest in peace. And then we'll have a little in memoriam section at the end where I put up all the actually dead franchises.
You can't put...
Jumping Flash isn't dead because there was a little Robot Astro in Astro's Playroom.
Rocket Knight Adventures isn't dead because Konami's gonna shit out another fucking stupid remake.
Contra's not dead because they keep making shitty ass Contra games.
God of War isn't dead because Valhalla just came out.
That's a great point. We should start every video by gazing lovingly into each other.